Thailand, and good morning and good day to all of you who are listening in virtually, participating virtually in this expert forum for producers and users of disaster-related statistics. My name is Rike Hansen, and I oversee economic and environment statistics at the United Nations ESCAP, which is one of the United Nations regional commissions, and ESCAP is based here in Bangkok, Thailand. It is my honor to open this year's expert forum and also bid you a warm welcome for those of you who call in from around the world, from all of us who are gathered here in Bangkok. In addition to working in ESCAP, I also have the pleasure and honor of chairing a global group, an interagency and expert group that works to develop global guidance for disaster-related statistics. The welcome I'm making is on behalf of all the co-organizers of this expert forum, and co-organizers includes all the United Nations regional commissions from around the world. It includes the United Nations Headquarters Statistics Division in New York, and also UNDRR. Now, this year's expert forum is the third expert forum, and this year we are emphasizing a few things which you will all see reflected in both the concept and the program for this expert forum. We are focusing on statistics, we are focusing on the production of those statistics and on the use of those statistics. We are looking at use of statistics for risk-informed planning, risk-informed policy, and to monitor both national and global commitments for disaster risk reduction, including, for example, monitoring the Sendai framework, which we will have the opportunity to hear much more about during this week. We hope by the end of the expert forum that we will have a list of identified priority needs to accelerate disaster-related statistics advancement, and also to have identified a number of research topics that can guide further normative development at the global level. Those of you who've had a chance to look at the program for the event will have noted that it's structured around key elements of disaster-related statistics, the framework that has been developed. We will have 9 sessions during the expert forum, and we will have the chance to both focus on classifications, on impacts, on expenditure, and much, much more. But now it's time to head into the first session, which is an introduction session. Next slide, please. Before getting into the balls of the session, it is also my duty to share a few housekeeping issues with all of you, which is information that is relevant to all hybrid sessions during this expert forum. Next slide, please. And next one. Thank you. So on this slide, you will see a few bullet points, housekeeping items. We are holding these hybrid sessions with online interpretation, English, Arabic, French, Russian, Spanish. You can select your preferred language in Zoom after joining. And also we ask each of you, if you haven't already done so, change your name in Zoom so that it's clear that you have both country or name of organization and your first and last name, so we have a good overview of who's listening in from out there. When you do intervene in the forum, please do use your headphone and a microphone for the best sound, and try to not go too fast to make sure that our interpreters can follow. If you have questions or comments that you want to contribute, please use the chat function in Zoom, and then our session chairs will return to it at a time where it fits in the session, or use your electronic hand if you would like to intervene. If you want to intervene orally, we strongly encourage you to do so in English. If you want to make an intervention in another language, we encourage you to type in the chat. And we are encouraging you to do this to avoid unnecessary delay, because we have so many languages being interpreted into and from. Please go to the next slide. I think it's time for me now to hand over to the chair of the first session, Setting the Scene. This is Mr. Michael Nagy, who works as a statistician at the Economic Commission for Europe. Michael, please.
Thank you very much, Rike. So I think I don't need any further self-introduction. Thank you very much for this, and thank you for the honor to chair session number 1. Yeah, let me start with the objectives. So we have 2 main objectives of this session. As you called, setting the scene. We would like to have everybody on the same level of information, what the objectives of this event are, and also in terms of substance, right? What has been produced by international organizations, how does this support countries in their efforts to have better disaster-related statistics. And the second objective has already been fulfilled. It was informed about the housekeeping items. Like for each other session, we have organized it according to 3 main key questions that we would like to answer together. So the first question is, why do we need better disaster-related statistics? The second one is, how does this expert forum contribute to the existing global, regional and national efforts to improving the quality of disaster-related statistics? And the third question, who are the participants of the expert forum and what are their expertise? We have 3 different means in addressing these questions. We have a keynote speaker from UNDRR, who will introduce in a minute, who will inform us about, from a global perspective, about the progress made, but also the challenges that are still out there in terms of getting better data for disaster risk management and monitoring on a global level. We will have a panel discussion with representatives from different international organizations, which will help to inform you a little bit about what has been already done in the past and how you can benefit from that. And there is also a short possibility to ask questions, but I think we can only take 2 or 3 questions maximum from the audience. And lastly, we're going to have a short Mentimeter survey. I think it's 3 or 4 questions that are being asked to you, and maybe you can can go to the next slide, please. We would like to invite you to open your the electronic tools that you have. You can scan the QR code here, for example, here in the room. Or those who see it online. So we would like to invite you to use these 50 minutes now to answer these questions, because this will help us to understand who is connected, who is participating, and there are also a few questions that will show us what are your expectations, and we will get back to this at the end of the expert forum in the last session. Yeah, without further ado, I would like to continue, and maybe I can also ask to put this information in the chat for those who are online, so that it's easier just to click on this. Having said this, I would like to go to the next part of this session, which is our keynote speech, which will be done by Mark Gordon from UNDRR. Mark is a senior coordinator of the midterm review of the Sender framework. And in his previous roles, he was coordinating the Hyogo framework monitoring and was also strongly engaged in the interagency and expert group on SDGs and the open-ended intergovernmental and expert working group on Sender coordination and the Global Assessment Report 2019. Mark, I hope you are online and can hear me, and I hand over the floor to you, but I would like to remind you, you have 12 minutes for this. I will remind you 1 minute before, and if I understand correctly, the slides will be managed from our team here in Bangkok, so just please let us know when we have to switch to the next slide. So Mark, over to you.
Super. Thank you so much, Mikkel and Rika. Wonderful to see you both again. I'm just slightly sad that I can't be in the room with you and be able to share this in person, but it's wonderful to be back with you all, with so many friends in the room to discuss these fundamentally important topics. I am conscious that I need to speak slowly. However, I have much to say in my 12 minutes. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on Mikkel and Rika, making sure that they are cracking the whip. But let's go straight into the content, because as many of you will know, we have just concluded, in the next slide please, the high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly on the midterm review of the Sendai framework. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. And in that, we saw for the very first time the agenda of risk reduction and UNDRR being convened in the General Assembly by the President of the General Assembly. And this not only is a pivotal moment in terms of the implementation of the framework, of course, but I think more broadly, it's a pivotal moment in how member states are starting to accord greater priority to understanding and managing risk in all decisions, in all sectors and all scales. And I think that we can draw some correlations between this priority being accorded by member states in the era of COVID, of climate breakdown, in the era of financial systems fragilities or food systems vulnerabilities, rapid technological change, misuse of AI and others, that we fundamentally need to apply that which we know better in how we understand and how this features in policy, in decision, in investments and behavior. I think that this quote from the President of the General Assembly puts that notion particularly well, and I hope that we can make sure infuses our reflections in this expert forum as to how we can better understand the intricate interconnections and interdependencies that do exist between multiple systems and multiple aspects of how societies navigate forwards to 2030 and beyond. And these were sentiments that were reiterated not just by the President of the General Assembly in New York last month, but by the Deputy Secretary General, by the SRSG, and indeed it set the tone for member state interventions and stakeholder interactions throughout the high-level meeting in May. So if we go to the next slide quickly, this was a extremely thorough process. Next slide, please. And in the sense that we had a 2-year exercise of interaction with member states and with stakeholders, quite surprising take-up by both sets of communities and constituencies, given that this was clearly not the only review in town, but we saw an enormous volume of information being submitted to the midterm review process, which we have tried to capture in the reports that were the synthesis published by the General Assembly in January, and the main report published by the UNDRR in 6 UN languages in March and April. Please do be in touch if you wish to see some of those submissions and indeed the reports. They are all available in the public domain, including some of the thematic studies that have informed member state deliberations. But of course, the pivotal moment of the high-level meeting came with the adoption of the political declaration by the General Assembly, and this was informed indeed by these submissions of member states and stakeholders. And the declaration and the reports that informed it provide us all with a clear direction for course correction, for accelerating and amplifying implementation of the Sendai framework, more broadly risk-informed sustainable development, and decision-making, investment and behavior to 2030 and beyond. And in so doing, the General Assembly calls for greater attention in all countries to strengthen awareness and understanding of new, emerging and future disaster risks. And I would invite us all to consider that in our reflections and our deliberations in this forum moving forward. Next slide. Just to be very brief, that the political declaration summarizes the areas for follow-up and action, including but not restricted to risk reduction standards, legislation and regulations, to comprehensive risk governance, around data collection, disaggregation and monitoring, risk analytics and foresight, and de-risking investments, as well as the integration of risk reduction in common country assessments and in UN planning and programming, including within the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. Next slide, please. And in follow-up and action, that the declaration also explicitly calls for input of the midterm review findings and recommendations, the call to action of the political declaration into other intergovernmental outcomes of United Nations conferences and summits in the economic, social, and environmental fields. And this is so fundamentally important to our ability to be able to really drive risk informed, or the availability and application of risk information that this community and others are going to be so pivotal in providing to decision makers. But it will only happen with the energy and drive of member states, including NSOs, together with UN system partners and other stakeholders. Next slide, please. To assure that these are systematically applied and supported in the integration and alignment and application of these calls to action, as well as the findings and recommendations in a whole raft of exercises that will take place throughout this year into 2024 and beyond. Of course, many of you are already engaged in some of these areas, but you will note that this goes well beyond some of them familiar. Of course, the global stocktake on the Paris Agreement, follow-up to the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan, the follow-up to the Water Conference of March, but into follow-up actions of the Global Biodiversity Framework, the SDG Summit, and indeed into some of the aspects of the Secretary General's work around our common agenda, the Global Risk Report, foresight activities, Futures Labs, and into the Summit of the Future in 2024. Driving and helping to support the SG's prevention-centric reform agenda of UN 2.0 and effective multilateralism. And therefore, as we focus on implementation, at the same time, starting to imagine what the successor framework to the Sendai framework may look like. So I will quickly go through now some of the main outputs, and if we can go to the next slide, please. We'll just very briefly touch upon the main findings, and I think some of these will be very familiar to many of you, but these were wide and varied, and I think showed fundamentally how we are starting to come to terms with the fact of understanding the systemic nature of risk and how risk cascades or is propagated from local to national to global, can provoke planetary level risks that are increasingly existential in nature, and contagion can move both vertically and horizontally and through time and space. And many of the aspects that contribute to this reside within how currently siloed risk governance architecture does not allow this interaction and intercommunication between sectors, disciplines and domains, that there is still a overriding focus on response rather than prevention, and that in many instances, not just in terms of private sector decision-making, but indeed in how we shape capital, that risk continues to be allowed to be externalized, or ignored, or played out over a longer time frame than perhaps a shorter time frame than perhaps it should be. But there are aspects that I'm sure you will be focusing on in great detail around the lack of interoperability between various data sets and decision makers, and the capacity to assess and access and interpret risk data and knowledge. Next slide, please. In the recommendations, and these were the elements that then informed member state deliberations on the political declaration that ran from February through till May, you can see that there was a very strong call coming from member states and non-state actors for a fundamental renovation of risk governance and how that is accorded mandate and responsibility that is fundamentally across all state institutions and not to reside in a single entity responsibility domain. And that this must be supported by not only enhanced understanding of the systemic nature of risk, but equally how that information can be shared, brought to bear in considering the interdependencies and interactions between sectors, disciplines and scales. Now this breaking down of data silos that you see here coming through, some of the recommendations that we saw, and strengthening the data ecosystem to be able to adopt these intersectoral approaches were discussed in great detail. And I would imagine that this is something that you will be taking forward in your deliberations and recommendations, and of course with a resounding recommendation for strengthening collaboration between the statistical, risk reduction and all other sectoral communities as we seek to navigate livable pathways to 2030 and beyond. If you quickly go to next slide, please, I'll just take you through then the political declaration itself, which clearly will be the principal signpost for states and non-state actors in how we respond to these calls. But again, please do consult the reports, which are extremely rich and important in how it's going to guide our thinking and how we organize, collaborate, determine novel partnerships, and are able to explore how we can take a more collective responsibility to understanding and managing risk before it manifests as a shock. And these I've just very inadequately tried to summarize in 4 slides by the priorities for action, where you can put an emphasis on some of the data aspects, and this clearly within priority for action 1, where there is a explicit call to strengthen and provide capacity finance and technology development, for data collection, for risk assessment and strategic foresight activities, which is starting to make that explicit link between national to regional to global risk surveillance and responses to current, new and emerging risks, and how we can organize within
1 minute, Mark, please, 1 minute.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, right. So I will race through and hoping that you have all seen these coming through the declaration, including how we can ensure this notion of interrelationship between sectors and domains, which is captured not just in availability, but the application of that, and how the interoperability of that is so fundamentally important. Quickly on to priority 2, so next slide, please. And again, this is touching upon the elements I talked to you before, but it also has, of course, a hugely important impact on how we can organize within the data and information environment the evolving nature of risk governance within all sectoral line ministries and domains, with being able to support the understanding of trade-offs and co-benefits of decisions, of policies, of public and private investment decisions. And these are elements that will need to be supported by risk data from the public domain, yes, but increasingly also from the private domain in supporting both public and private decision-making moving forward. Next slide, please. In terms of the investment domain, one of the most important conversations, and I would hope that we can take some time to unpack this a little bit, will be, yes, in terms of how this can infuse and inform public investment decision-making, but equally, what does this mean for the rules of the game of the global financial system, and how risk is priced, accounted for and disclosed in all financial transactions. For at the moment, that they as currently allowing those to be discounted and to the detriment of both human and ecosystems, health and well-being moving forward. I would expect that this could be one of the areas that certainly, as the President of the General Assembly said, was one of the game changer areas of how we fundamentally can support the de-risking of investment, both public and private, moving forward. Penultimate slide around priority for action 4, please, and the notion of what can be brought to bear in terms of bringing this cross-sectoral nature of decision-making within disaster response, recovery and rehabilitation. Yes, but fundamentally unpacking those underlying drivers of risk. I know that Michael's going to be looking at his watch. I will allow you to just digest these and finish perhaps with the final slide of a quote once again by the President of the General Assembly at the conclusion of the high-level meeting, where I hope this will inspire and infuse the conversations to come, that these are so fundamentally central for how we reappraise what we value and how we value as societies, as states, as communities, as individuals, in reconfiguring a growth-centric approach to be able to better account for both planetary boundaries, which of course are finite, and human well-being, as opposed to wealth concentration and risk accumulation. And if you allow me, Michael, I will stop there, and you can find more details on how to contact me and access more information in the final slide, which I'm sure will provide an appropriate backdrop for us. Back to you, Michael and Lily. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and sorry for being the bad cop, but that's the role that was assigned to me. No, but thank you very much for a very good speech, and apologies, we had a technical glitch here in the room, but I saw from the chat messages that for online participants, everything was fully audible. So thank you for this, and just a few reflections from my side. So it was very good to hear that from this political declaration of the midterm review, there were so many data-related issues. So just mentioning a few: strengthening collaboration and strengthening the data ecosystem, talks about interoperability, also to enhance the collection interpretation of disaggregated data. So I think this reassures that we are doing the right thing here. And it was interesting to hear that what your take-home messages from the global point of view matches very nicely what we discussed earlier today in breakout groups with the countries, with the country perspective. So I think there is a great grade of overlap, and this was very reassuring. So thank you very much, Mark. And if you wish, please stay connected. And we continue here with our short panel discussion. And I would like to first introduce our moderator. This is Irakli Abkaidze. I hope I pronounce it more or less correctly. So Irakli is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Statistical Office of Georgia. And the environmental statistics and disaster-related statistics issues are one of his supervision areas. On the panel, we're going to have here in the room, we have Wafa Abulhosen, who represents ESCAP. We have Rike Munk-Hansen from ESCAP. And I hope we have online Emil Ivanov, our colleague from New York from UN Statistics Division. And last but not least, Animesh Kumar, who is the head of the Bonn office of UNDRR. So I hope you are online. And having said this, I hand over to Irakli.
Thank you very much, dear Michael. Dear colleagues, dear experts, dear forum participants, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you. It's great honor for me to participate in the forum and moderate this session as well, which is a very important part of the forum. So during the next 25 minutes, we have an opportunity to participate in the discussion with distinguished experts from ESCAP, UNICE, UNICA, UNSWA, UNSD also. So we can discuss about following topics. For example, what kind of connection may exist between last forum, Beirut, and current forum. So these organizations and the indicators created the organization, how can this indicator help countries to develop real disaster-related statistics, etc. For my part, I'll take advantage with my role and provide some words my country's experience. Georgia, located South Caucasus region, faces several disasters. So its mountainous terrain makes it susceptible to landslide, earthquake, flood, flash flood. So in early preparedness and early warning system, it's crucially important to minimize the bad influence of the disaster for country and its population. And accordingly, Georgia has developed some action to this direction, but it faced many challenges. And the challenges were right down on the desks and very good presented by my colleagues from Armenia, Nara. And we have lots of discussion about the challenges. So I think I should not waste my limited time and go ahead to our distinguished experts with questions. My first respondent is Wafa. So I want to ask her make a brief summary between the last and current forum. So, what are the main lessons learned from last forum and
des leçons
current forum? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like also to welcome all our participants online from all the regions. We're very happy to meet here. And from last forum, what we had two major disasters since the Beirut Forum. And as we discussed it with the participants in the warming session this afternoon, the Pakistan floods and the massive earthquake in Turkey and Syria. So it's never like too late to work on disaster-related statistics and to bring all the stakeholders together, to bring the countries and the different regions to discuss what is the value of official statistics, how we can make this value available as public good to be used to service, like to put policies to better manage disasters. What the recommendations we had from the last forum, many of them are what Mark presented on coordination, de-siloing, breaking the silos, working on a data ecosystem that bring the different stakeholders, private, public sector. So we have the report of the previous forum and the first forum on the website of this forum. And I think it's very important to look at them and see like the most important things are coming up. Plus, we have new tools to use, new technologies, new data sources that we can leverage on to improve our way of analyzing data, collecting data, and disseminating this data.
Thank you, dear Rafa. Very completely outlined. And now it's time to turn to Michael with the question. Michael, UNICE has developed indicator sets of climate change and disaster-related statistics. How can countries in the region and outside of the region benefit from this work? And how can we navigate through all these regional and global indicator sets?
Thank you, Irakli. I think I need to clarify first of all that all these indicator sets that are being developed by expert groups in various organizations are developed for the benefit of countries. So there is usually no reporting obligation related to it. These are simply recommendations, and please see them as recommendations. You can see these different indicator sets as a kind of menu for your country where you can start with, or where you can pick what is relevant for your own country and start developing national indicator sets or sets of statistics that are needed, or dashboards, for example. Let me give the example of this disaster-related statistics indicators that we recently developed together with an expert group and international organizations at ECE. So this is the result of an extensive work of experts that work together and taking into account regional information needs, but also national information needs. And to explain the benefits of the countries, I can say such recommendations help, for example, to strengthen the evidence for disaster risk in a country in an internationally comparable way. So you can benchmark yourself with others, and at the same time, you get the big picture of disaster risk in a country. And the same is for climate change related indicators. You can do this in a coherent and consistent way across even national boundaries. And so you can see this really as a starting point for work. How is this related to other indicator sets? We have, for example, the global set of climate change indicators and statistics, where Emil, I think, will be talking about. And we have ECE sets. So I would say if you're an ECE country, it makes sense to start with the ECE sets, because this takes more into consideration the regional specificities that we have. But don't limit yourself to that. Look at the bigger picture and look at also at the international work. So it's up to the countries to use this. And in terms of alignment, we have not worked in silos when we developed this. We picked, for example, indicator frameworks that were already out there. We used the disaster-related statistics framework and so on. So there's a close connection, but it's up to the countries to use this wisely.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next question belongs to Emil, which is with us online platform. Emil, are you here for you? Hi, Emil.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Emil. So this question belongs to you. So how does the global set of climate change statistics and indicators help countries in their effort to implement disaster-related statistics? So what is this recommendation to countries and the national statistics offices on how to start with this work?
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me well. Good morning from New York. I work at the Environment Statistics section of UNSD. Just a few words about the global set. It was adopted last year at the 53rd session of the Statistical Commission. In brief, it links the reporting requirements under the Paris Agreement with the most prominent statistical frameworks and guidelines, including the Sendai framework, the Framework for Development of Environment Statistics, FDES, SIA, and also IPCC-based recommendations. It contains 158 indicators and 190 statistics allocated into the 5 policy areas defined by IPCC: drivers, impact, vulnerability, mitigation, and adaptation. Following the adoption, our main effort was to ensure that there is some adequate implementation support, and we developed implementation guidelines and a self-assessment tool. I'll say no more about it, but I'll paste some links how to access those tools. How are disasters addressed in the global set? First, by including those indicators from the Sendai framework. In fact, the majority of them clearly relate to climate change. And second, by including also indicators that are not sufficiently defined at present about issues that are rather expected in the future. Those are mostly what we call tier 3 that require further methodology development. So there is no fine line to distinguish what is climate and what are disasters indicators and statistics. Of course, there is quite some overlap. Somehow we have, as an indication, is mostly what relates to disaster management is.
ولكن إجمالا الأمر يتعلق بإدارة الكوارث وتتعلق.
Will happen in the future. What sort of support we are offering to countries? I want to emphasize that there is a growing engagement. It started with a global consultation in 2021 to which 86 countries responded by initiating a sort of self-assessment. Now this number is just growing. Countries, just as Michael mentioned, have started developing their own national sets of climate statistics and indicators and setting up processes to oversee that, like national committees, as well as roadmaps. Somehow a culmination of the first step is when some sort of high-level support has been secured and some funding to initiate a national program. What we recommend specifically to NSOs in countries is that they do start this self-assessment, for which the tool that we published will help. It's called CSAT, and they do not do any further work before consulting thoroughly with the national focal points to UNFCCC and also with the national disasters agencies. Key points will be to explain what are the benefits of including engaging the existing work on statistics and indicators under the national statistics system, and also to help statisticians to better engage in those processes. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emil. Our next respondent is UNDR representative. It's Animesh. I hope, Animesh, you are following us.
Yes, I am here online.
Okay, thank you very much. So, as for the question, how we are progressing in strengthening disaster data and statistics? What is these opportunities and challenges, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And also I want to join the hosts in welcoming all the participants, both as a representative of the UNDRR, but also as co-chair with Reke of the Interagency and Expert Working Group on Disaster-Related Statistics. Apologies that I couldn't be in person because of the ongoing subsidiary body meetings of climate change, which kicked off today here in Bonn. I would use my time allocated for highlighting 3 areas of progress and 3 upcoming opportunities on disaster statistics. The first is the huge volume of data that we are currently generating through the official reporting processes. For example, as of now, 156 countries are reporting on the progress on Sendai framework, and in the process, hence also reporting and contributing to SDGs as well as other intergovernmental mechanisms like the New Urban Agenda, Samoa Pathway, and so on. This huge volume of data, which are all official in nature, has greatly enhanced the level of risk accountability and governance. The second key area of progress is in context of the data on losses and damages, which is also a key opportunity that will come very soon. We know that we have been supporting countries together with different participants and between partners on a system called Desinventar. More than 100 countries are currently using it. But now we are revamping the whole system, partnering with UNDP and WMO to generate a new generation loss and damage tracking system that will be defined by greater levels of interoperability, greater levels of disaggregation, but also have better data standards in context of hazardous events and its cascading effect on events at the localized scales. We hope that the new system would be announced at the COP28. And the third key area of progress is in context of data standards. We already know about the hazard classification. Professor Virginia Murray was also among the online participants just now. We also have invested in different methodologies to greatly enhance our rigor of assessments, but also this work on disaster-related statistics with the forthcoming common statistical framework at the global framework will greatly enhance our own prowess in context of better understanding risk and losses. Now, 3 key areas of opportunities. Mark already presented the highlights from midterm review, which tells us where we are in context of data and also calls for greater investments in better data standards and better data collection with better levels of analysis. Also, a key opportunity for us is the Early Warnings for All initiative that was launched last year. The vision is that every person on Earth would be covered by an early warning by 2027. For that, we need huge volume of data to be able to measure our success or failure in doing so, but also informing which hazards to monitor. If we don't know which disasters are taking place at the localized scales, we will not be able to tell whether the early warning is efficacious enough, is efficient enough. And the third area of opportunity is in context of the ongoing discussions in climate change, both in context of the loss and damage funding arrangements, the Santiago Network, global goal and adaptation, the global stocktake of the Paris Agreement, all require huge volumes of data. And with our current data availability within the domain of disaster risk reduction, including through the Sendai framework, we have a lot to offer in context of framing many of these discussions. So Chair, I'll stop there and looking forward to some very fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the fully outline. Thank you very much. So this question belongs to Ricky. So dear Ricky, where we stand on developing global guidance for disaster statistics. So where we need press to gas, where we should slow down.
Well, yes, big questions here, and I'm also seeing that we I mean, it's evening time in Bangkok, yeah. So don't have your ambition level here too high, but I'll do my best. I'll also do my best to be short because we are, I think, a little squeezed for time here. So in short, well, what we are hearing now already in this session, what we've heard in the room here also this afternoon, is that we've actually already been working for many years on statistics related to disasters, although we've only started really referring to it as a domain of statistics very recently. You know, I was just looking up the damage loss assessments that came out from colleagues in ECLAC. That dates back to the 70s. We've heard also that pulling things together for a disaster-related statistics framework here in Asia and the Pacific, well, that started also before Sendai framework became a reality. What's happened since then is really an acceleration of efforts, because that's what the Sendai framework managed, to pull a lot of efforts. We heard from ECE, your work, pulling in We've seen a lot of national activities and enthusiasm. We saw back in 2019 that this topic was recognized by the Global Statistical Commission. And we also saw that subsequently to this, we managed to establish a group to work on actual statistical standards and guidance on this. And this group will meet later this week for its third meeting, and what we will be discussing there is really where do we go from here. So in that sense, the timing of this third expert forum is perfect. We've already looked into some of the burning questions in terms of research topics where we have issues papers developed to really dig into what might become global agreed guidance on disaster risk reduction expenditures, economic laws, and environmental laws. These are papers we will have the opportunity to discuss further this week. We've also heard that what really needs to be done to move a little bit beyond just talking about what to do and actually doing it. Well, a major barrier here really has to do with institutional setups. And I think that came out so clearly. So in short, a lot is happening. A lot still needs to be done. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. And the next question belongs to all of you. But what are the major recent upcoming output work or activities of your organization, support countries, those regions?
Yeah, and I think we have to be super brief, 1 minute maximum. Yeah, so I can do it very quickly. A role example. So we have published this recommendation on the role of official statistics on measuring hazardous events and disasters. I will post this in the chat. So for those who are interested, I think it's very helpful for NSOs to find their role within the institutional environment. And I have also mentioned already earlier this work on the indicators, and we're going to have a workshop about this also on Thursday for those who are in person. But I think it's also important work for countries that help countries to implement national sets of indicators.
Thank you. At ESCAP in Asia Pacific, in addition to the normative work I've just outlined some of, what we are doing is to accelerate our work to actually provide technical assistance to countries, and the first countries in line that are already ongoing is Bangladesh, Mongolia, and Nepal.
Yes, I think the regions in Europe and Asia Pacific are more advanced in pushing or in working on this area of statistics. At the West Asia and maybe in Africa, we are trying to catch up and learning from the work that has been done. We are doing pilot projects using like Earth observation for flood detection. We did a project in Egypt. We are developing the CRVS, the vital statistics, which is very important for disaster-related statistics. And we are collaborating with the League of Arab States and the regional office in Cairo to really get closer to the member countries in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last question to Emil. How are the regional efforts and national experiences in developing climate and disaster statistics taken up in global work? How can countries benefit from the global and the regional activities? Emil?
Thank you. The short answer, how are we taking this into account, is by first trying to understand and mapping what are the gaps and overlaps thematically. This helps us to define certain synergies, especially to prioritize methodologies. For example, on gender and health are the most recent ones. The work started actually in a bottom-up way by analyzing national communications, national adaptation plans to UNFCCC. And those helped us to define many of the indicators included in the global set. Also, what helped us a lot, of course, was the indicators set by ECE. Most of the indicators are included in, replicated in the global one. There are a lot more activities that are coming. in many ways related to methodologies and related to strengthening capacity. We are trying to find a way to get a stronger overview. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. We are exploring ways to strengthen those synergies by we have two inventories. One is on what data is being collected by international organizations, and another what capacity is being delivered. Those are things that we do regularly, every 2-3 years. Afterwards, we have envisaged that there will be another global consultation after 3 or 4 years, which should lead to the revision of the global set in a future session of the Commission. So again, we are recommending the countries to use the CSAT. We are starting to see interesting examples. For example, in Zimbabwe, the whole exercise was completed looking at all the indicators. And since there is not only thematic synergy and overlap, but also institutional, once they completed that, they managed to extract then the key messages for all the different sets.
Okay, thank you, dear Emil, thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you very much, but I can't release you yet. I'm wondering, we have a question from online chat. It's not too bad. It means that we have more time for audience. Dear audience, I want to encourage you to participate in the discussion and ask questions to our experts. Yeah. Any questions or comments from audience? Okay. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much. So I think that any issues, any problems face any countries isn't solved by any meeting or any session, but my expectation from this forum is that it give us right decisions, right recommendations to cover these issues we are facing. And I think so this first session carry on very well, and good start is very important for any business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irakli. Thank you very much, Moda. Please. So I'm representing. So this gives us a bit of picture who was really connected. I know that some countries have problems to access the main data. It does not really maybe reflect the full picture, but all in all, we can see there is a bit of dominance of national statistical offices, but we also have national disaster risk and disaster management, and also I think very important other governmental organizations. And this was one of the objectives of this forum, to bring these people from the country together to talk to each other, which is not necessarily happening in all the cases. We have quite a number of international organizations, academia, and others. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. It's okay. So yeah, the let's say which regions or continents are represented here. It's not really a surprise that Asia has a quite kind of a dominance here, even if it's not really the absolute majority, which is good. We have a number of Europeans here, including me, from the Americas, Africa, and Oceania. So this is the order of representation. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this was the question, who has already participated, the various previous expert fora. So most are here for the first time. Welcome. I hope that this picture next year will look a little bit different, that we have more that also attended the previous meeting. Next slide, please. Which now leads us more to the expectations. So let me see what we have here. So it's coming up. So I pick a few because it will be difficult. We have 35 answers. Let me just pick a few. Networking with colleagues, further understanding of disaster-related statistics, knowledge sharing. It's like network with colleagues. I think it's very similar. Getting more experiences from data and usage. Learning about developments in other countries. That's excellent. Maybe we can have a look at the next slide and pick a few comments. So scrolling down, yeah. Also get informed about recent developments, learn best practices, update on activities around the world. I think this is kind of repetitive. And maybe one more scrolling down before we look at the last slide. To learn the usage of disaster data, to plan effectively with disaster statistics, inspiration, international status, and to engage countries and stakeholders into coordination, make use of official statistics, and so on and so forth. I think we will have an opportunity to analyze this before we come to the last session on Wednesday. So thank you very much for all of you who provided more input. I think we don't have the time to go into more detail now, but we will analyze this, put this together, and then come back to this at the last session. If I can have the last slide, I think this is the word cloud, where we ask to have one word in English, and I see in the center knowledge, learning, and learn. It's not so big, but it's there, fun. Standardization of hazards, and so on and so forth, so you can see yourself. So this means the bigger the term, the more actually respondents put it. And I think knowledge, learning, I think this is key, what we can see here. So we have overrun our time by already 1 minute. I'm feeling really responsible for that, but I would like to use the opportunity to thank everybody who contributed to the session. So I'm the nice guy now who says thank you to everybody. I'm the bad guy who has to apologize that we had to cut some of you short, but that's how life is sometimes. But I think it was a good opportunity to get a bit of basic knowledge, to set the scene, to see what's happening around the world, what's happening in different international organizations, to learn a little bit what happens in Georgia and in other countries. Thank you very much for this. And having said this, I think we can close the session, and I hand over to Rike maybe for some organization announcement.
Okay. Should we just give them all a hand, including our chair for the first session here? Thank you very much. And I am just looking to a 2-minute break before we kick off the next session, which will be handled from ECLAC's side. So I think we can maybe stay here. Let me just check with our desk here.
Yes, Rika, I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Wonderful to see you. Georgina,
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you. Fine, thank you.
Good. So you have time to just breathe for 2 minutes before kicking us off. Yeah?
Excellent.
Okay, super.
Thank you.
Purposes of like that's working behind.
Don't leave the room, please. We continue straight into the next session. Very good. So, Georgina, whenever you are ready, you are good to go.
And the rest, the break is not?
Basically,
exactly.
we ran over a little bit in the first session, Georgina, and that's why the break is this short. So
okay.
we are simply ready to continue when you are.
Okay, excellent. Let me check. Can you help me with the presentation? Or I need to share my screen? Excellent, thank you, panelists. Thank you. So, good day, everyone. This is Georgina Alcántar from Santiago de Chile, and at the CLAC, the Environmental Statistical Unit on the Statistical Division. So in the order of the agenda, we will to deliver the session 2 about the assessing and mapping risk exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity. Thank you. Next, please. With respect on the agenda, I want to say that this session is more like a conversation between our panelists. So I want to start that in the information age, we have data on phenomena and their location in time. Now we are looking for information about location-based distribution patterns, trends and behaviors in our data, and our traditional approaches are not sufficient to cope with it. We have data science tools and hats such as, machine learning, geospatial analysis, pattern recognition, neural networks, geospatial statistics, and data cubes, etc. etc. Next, please. Of course, with that information, we can get better decision-making. Requires more integrated location-based information about connection and causality on site data and time. These relationships are to produce, manage, and disseminate disaster-related statistics. However, it demands the use of non-official data sources, such as Earth observations, remote sensing, and citizen science, for example. Nonetheless, the expert eye at the national level is always needed for validate and complement. Next, please. With this on mind, this session will focus on how to use emerging trends and new technologies for gathering, analyzing, and visualizing disaster-related data to assess risk exposure, vulnerability, and copy capacity, thereby improving disaster planning and response effort. And also we can identify and measure challenge and capacity building requirements. Next, with these questions on mind, next, please. We have 4 panelists from the Americas. We start with Ms. Maria Jimena, focal point for disaster of the Geostatistics Direction of the Colombian National Administrative Department of Statistics. In the second place, we have Ms. Yesarela Lopez, Director of Technical Coordination of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico. And the third place is Mr. Miguel Montero, Territorial Analysis of the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development of the Dominican Republic. And the end, we have a presentation for Mr. Eric Louvier, General Director of the Center of Mapping and Earth Observation and the Natural Resources Center of Canada. All of these gentle panelists share with us several proposals and ways to attend the disaster, the information related with that disaster, and that information to manage the disaster and report and measure the disaster. So I try from ECLAC, we think that this presentation will be so interesting for you about the information, the point of view, of course, and also with the innovative use of the technology available for all of us. Next, please. As I said in our agenda, the first panelist, Ms. Maria Jimena from Colombia. Please, Maria Jimena. I want to remind that we have 10 minutes for our presentations. Please be on time. Thank you, Maria Jimena. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Correa, and on behalf of the Colombian National Statistics Office, DANE, in Colombia, for its acronym in Spanish, I thank you to ECLAC for this invitation to share with you the experience of Colombia on using geospatial information for developing disaster-related statistics. Next one, please. Thank you. The first question, it is about the technology we leverage to improve data collection and reporting the impacts of disasters. To address this issue, it is important to mention the key elements of the strategic framework on geospatial information and services for disasters, formulated by the United Nations Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management in 2017. UNGGIM created this framework to optimize the benefits of using geospatial information and services that also help member states to implement the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. This framework aims to achieve the human, socioeconomic, and environmental risks and impacts of disaster are prevented or reduced through the use of geospatial information and services. The implementation of this strategic framework must rely on geospatial information and services, relevant statistical information, and a strong commitment and cooperation between disaster risk management stakeholders and key partners. Here we have the priorities for actions: governance and policies, awareness raising and capacity building, data management, common infrastructure and services, and resource mobilization. Next one, please. By 2022, as contribution for achieving its priority number 1, governance and policies at global and regional levels, the National Administrative Department of Statistics in Colombia, the National Geographic Institute of Argentina, and the National Authority for Land Administration in Panama created a draft document entitled Good Practices, Value Proposition of a Governance Model on Geospatial Information Management and Services for Disasters, and Initial Policy and Standards, as part of the activities of the Working Group on Geospatial Information and Services for Disasters of the Regional Committee of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management for the Americas. A policy on geographic information and services for disasters implies the support of different actors for the adequate identification of needs and users, the production, management, dissemination, use, and evaluation of geospatial information. In this manner, the key elements of this policy are the regulation of legal framework related to access to information and also technologies at the country level. Second, political and financial support. Also, the resource mobilization, the data management, and the development of the national or regional spatial data infrastructure. This document that we present also highlights the need to implement a set of geographic information standards given by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Next, please. Thank you. Given the importance of offering quality geospatial information and services for disasters, DANE, as the statistical authority in Colombia, provides guidelines for the use of geospatial data, and specifically the National Geostatistical Framework, which is the main geospatial product offered by its geostatistics directions that support the process of making informed decisions for a wide range of purposes, including for, of course, disaster risk management. It is updated annually through the use of satellite images and field data collected in the development of statistical operations, and provides the spatial reference framework for the production and dissemination of statistical information in Colombia. The main advantage of using this national geostatistical framework is the possibility of offering a geographical disaggregation of the socioeconomic and environmental statistical information. Next, please. About the second question, about the challenges of integrating disaster-related statistics with these technologies I presented before, I want to highlight institutional collaboration, coordination, and partnerships according to legal frameworks on disaster risk management, supporting institutional structures, to optimize roles and responsibilities, to formulate and implement plans and programs with further financial support, also consolidate a technical infrastructure that support all these geospatial information and services, and that the geospatial data requests a fundamental geospatial data terms on disasters. It is requested a strong commitment and cooperation for all stakeholders and key partners involved in disaster risk management. Next, please. About the third question that we have, if we identify institutions for collaborating to improve disaster-related statistics in Colombia, of course. Regarding those, I must mention the national statistical system led by DANE, which gives guidelines for coordinating the official statistical information production and implements strategies for the integration of statistical and geospatial information. As part of this national statistical system, there are sectorial statistics committees, which provide instructions on the management and production of the country's official statistics in accordance with the themes of the National Statistical Plan. In 2021 was installed the Sectorial Statistical Committee for Geography, Environmental, and Territorial Planning, which addresses, among other topics, extreme events and disasters. Among the members of the committee are ministries and technical institutes. By 2022, its statistics group for adaptation and disaster risk management associated with climate variability events called its first meeting under the technical secretary of the Ministry of Environmental and Sustainable Development. Next, please. Finally, about this proposal that we built in the Working Group on Disaster of UNGGIM Americas, I want to highlight that the geospatial information management model for disasters must be based on a consolidated organizational structure with clear functions and responsibilities in accordance with legal frameworks and institutional structures. It is relevant to improve the articulation among the national focal point for monitoring the Sendai framework, headed by the National Agency for Disaster Management, the head of the statistical sector in the country, and coordinator of the National Statistical System and the National Spatial Data Infrastructure under the coordination of the National Cartography Agency. The highest level of this pyramid represents the reinforcements of the national systems and the international guide for the global comparison of statistics related to disasters. At this level, the national information system must provide comparable information related to disaster risk worldwide. Thank you, Georgina. Back to you.
Thank you, Jimena. Very, very illustrative, your presentation about the Colombian experience, and thank you for your mention our expert group with UNDRR. So next presentation is from Mexico, is Ms. Gesarela Lopez. Gesarela, please, the floor is yours. Remind, we have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgina. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here and share this session with all my colleagues from Americas. Next, please. The perspectives from the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, as INEGI, is that it's very important the interinstitutional coordination to provide the information necessary timely to the decision makers. Next, please. To this end, in Mexico, we have a national system of statistical and geography information conformed of each of the federal government ministries, state representatives, autonomous bodies, and representatives of the legislative. This facilitates coordination to generate information through 4 subsystems. One is the economic information, second is demographic and social information, third geography information, environment and territorial and urban planning, as well as government information, public security, and justice. With this, in this graphic, you could see the scheme how we coordinate these functions through all these systems. In the next, please. Likewise, INEGI participates in diverse working groups, national and international, particularly regarding the disasters. I want to highlight the work that is currently being carried out in the working group with the CLAC since 2018. Important activities have been carried out in the region, such as diagnosis, central frameworks, and matrices to standardize the criteria and concepts, work that is in progress and that is expected to have results very soon. On the other hand, the work that has been carried out in the disaster working group with UNESE has generated important products, such as recommendations to elaborate the statistical disasters proposals for indicators mainly. The link of the one of them is on the chat. Michael Nagy put the link in there. In the next, please. Now I want to share with you some of the tools and applications that have been developed at INEGI. This is the water flow of hydrography basis simulator. It's a special tool for hydrological analysis of runoff and surface flows in basins and subbasins throughout Mexico. It was developed to facilitate the study of the behavior of surface water resources in the basins, oriented towards simulation with geometric networks methods and functions for hydrological analysis. This tool allows planning and executing actions for the management and conservation of natural resources at the basin level in support of water security. The analysis of basins using hydrographic networks allows the identifications of risk areas in the event of extreme hydrometeorological phenomena, which can help the authorities and the population to take the necessary precautionary measures and avoid tragedies. In the next, please. Thank you. Another important tool developed is the geospatial data cube in Mexico, and for the public agencies in charge of the production of geography and statistical information, satellite images offer unprecedented opportunities to build consistent time series while covering the scarcity of data availability in situ. The frequency with which the information is generated is also remarkable. There are satellites capturing an image of every point on the Earth's surface every day. Under this premise, INEGI developed this application looking for the spread, the value, and show the impacts of the use of image through a consistent and standardized architecture of data for its exploitation, as well as the complex computational infrastructure required. As the first product derived from the exploitation of the data cube is the Landsat Geomedian program to observe and interpret the variations of the Mexican territory in simple ways. As you can see on the screen, this is a dynamic map that although it looks like a photo on the Mexican territory taken in a single instance, each median is actually a statistical summary known as geometric median, generated at the national level from satellite images corresponding to a period of 1 year. In the next slides, there are some examples of applications that we have done with this geospatial data cube. Please press the space bar.
Please press the space bar.
Yes, please. Or
we have an yes. Thank you.
This is one example of this application of the data cube. Is we can see the urban growth that the town on the town of Cancun, Quintana Roo, and has had in the period between 2000 and 2019. In the next slide, we can see another example. Please next. And press the thank you. This is a second example. You can see the creation of infrastructure, such as this means in the state of Zacatecas, whose evolution is from 2005 to 2019. And the last example is in the next slide. This is very representative because it is a case that can support the evaluation of public policies. In this visualization, the impact that a policy has to improve the use of water that allowed the restoration of Lake Chapala in the state of Jalisco, whose images are from 1984 to 2019. Thank you. In the next slide, we can see another product derived from the geospatial data cube is the surface water classification index from space, which is an experimental geospatial analysis tool that provides information on the presence of surface water in the Mexican territory. This is allows locating areas that at some point were flooded during a period sufficient to be captured by satellites for purposes of disaster prevention and care. And the next slide. The NDVI tool is an experimental geospatial analysis tool that provides information on the presence of vegetation in the Mexican territory. It makes it easier to differentiate vegetation from another types of ground cover and determine its general condition. It allows to define and visualize areas of vegetation on the map, as well as detector of abnormal changes in the growth process. In simple terms, it is a calculation of the health of the vegetation. It's an indicator that allows to calculate the health and its composition over time for each pixel of the country. If you can you press the space bar, please?
Ms. Thomas, you have 1 minute left.
Yes, as you can see in the dynamic graph, with this tool, we can know the changes that have occurred in each pixel on the time. The next, please. We are working now on the ocean accounts with the support of World Bank through ProBlue Fund, and to generate the ocean accounts, and we are developing the Ocean Data Hub of Mexico. And the last slide, I would like to share with you that we are working in Latin American and Caribbean in coordination with different regional institutions in a project to develop a regional data cube named Digital Earth of Americas, for which a roadmap was established considering the needs of installed capacity, technical capacity building, as well as identified countries' priorities. It's a pilot project, and this tool will be very useful to disaster topics. And next, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gesarela. As you can see, we have at this moment two great examples to manage spatial information from different proposals, and I hope you are finding interesting. So next panelist is Mr. Miguel Montero. He is territorial analyst of the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development of the Dominican Republic. Miguel, the floor is yours. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, my name is Miguel Stewart Montero from the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development from Dominican Republic. Thank you for the invitation to present our country experience with the implementation of technology for decision making. At the next, please. Phil, I will tell you about the context of my country, Dominican Republic, due to its geographic position in the hurricane route and the Antilles Arc is prone to be affected by the hydrometeorological, geodynamic, and other natural events, which added to all dynamic of social factor, cause high level of disaster risks. For a strong organ annual in 2007, the economic losses were estimated at $537 million, approximately 1.2% of gross domestic product for these years of reference. The range of the November 2016 and April 2017, the economic losses were estimated at $862 million, approximately 1.1% of the gross domestic product. For Hurricane Irma and Maria in April 2017, the economic loss were estimated at approximately 0.3% of gross domestic product. And for recent Hurricane Fiona in 2022, the economic loss were estimated at 0.3% of gross domestic product for this year of reference. The next, please. In order to respond to the rapid qualification of losses and damage, we have designed and implemented the system for the assessment of damage of the Dominican Republic, CIRED for its acronym in Spanish. It's an advanced tool that effectively systematizes information on direct economic losses caused by natural events. It is a part of the digital ecosystem of information for disaster risk management and climate action, one of the pillars of the Ministry of Economy for work in terms of data governance and risk knowledge. This system supports the decision-making in sustainable post-disaster recovery efforts. The next, please. In terms of how technology can improve data collection and reporting on disaster impact, CIRED allows us to document damage by location, sector, and kind of infrastructure, and damage assessment in such
en una manera rápida. También permite tomar decisiones y estimar el coste asociado con los daños.
Catastrophe, loss reporting, data, and damage indicator. With respect to the above, some of the loss and damage indicator for which CIRED will use as an administrative data are those of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Sendai Framework on direct economic losses attributed to disaster in relation to gross national domestic product, and direct economic losses in the housing sector or vital infrastructure attributed to disaster. It's important to highlight that the data of CIRED is articulated with the systematic information need of the Varsovia International Mechanism for loss and damage for the financing of development country suffering loss and damage as consequence of climate change. All of this input for the definition, all of this is input for the definition of public policies for disaster risk reductions. The next, please. For us, one of the main challenges in incorporating this process into decision-making is the interinstitutional articulation and interpolation of data from other instruments that try to collect information related to impact of disaster. This map is the right represent in blue the municipalities where we have trained people from 6 institutions to collect information with SIRET. For the next one, please. Okay, for Storm Fiona, the system was piloted with the Instituto de Agua Potable y Alcantarillado, INAPA, and the evaluators took 3 days after going out to the field to collect 80 record of damage. We currently are working on improving the management of data and information relevant to disaster risk management with institutions that make data relevant to risk analysis. Please, the next one. This process, we have identified 6 important points for data and information management, which we have 2 roles: to produce social, economic, and loss information, and to receive information for other state institutions for disaster risk analysis. Among the output we have identified are the variation of scenarios of the most probably damage and losses, the calculation of priorities indicators, and the follow-up of the disaster risk managers policies. We are also working on identifying needs and improvements to collaborate with another institution to improve disaster-related statistics. Well, that's all for me. Thank you for all.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for your presentation. We have a question on the chat, but please wait to the end of our panelist presentations to attend these questions. Thank you for your question. So for close these presentations, we have Mr. Louvier from Canada Center of Mapping and Earth Observations. Thank you, Eric, for your presentations. Remember that you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Clearly, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thanks a lot for the for this invitation. As you just mentioned, my name is Eric Louvier. I'm the Director General of the Canadian Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation. So I'm very happy to be here and share with you details on our emerging capacity in the field of artificial intelligence assisted automated mapping for change detection applied to disaster response. So in Canada, 20 years ago, our organization delivered the first digital atlas in the world, and today we are blazing trails again, and the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to create, update, model, and maintain key information and products such as elevation, hydrography, infrastructure, to provide a basis for many decision making, but specifically emergency management. And next slide. How do I? Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about that. So leveraging the newest technologies in the field of geospatial allows to do better, faster, and more efficiently response to disaster. And this should always be a priority. So at the in our organization, we aim at leveraging artificial intelligence to provide the first responders with critical information in a time frame that's never seen before. So whenever possible, on-demand access to imagery and AI processes of geospatial data have enabled new capability to include change detection and mapping of the extent of an event, either be flood, fire, earthquake, and to map infrastructure affected to better support the disaster response. So we're using AI to compare geospatial data before, during, and after a disaster, and provide some near real-time now understanding of how the event is unfolding on the ground. And this provides a variety of benefits for a government response. So the first responders, those boots on the ground, are now able to rapidly access the extent and scope of a disaster. This allows resources to be allocated to the area that it needs the most. For example, we can begin estimating and budgeting funds for immediate and midterm support and assistance in areas that are the most affected. So this mapping, we've done it in the past, we've provided this information, but what's the difference today? What's the game changer is what used to take days to do, sometimes week, can now be done in a matter of hours and minutes. Next slide. So how does this work? Our change detection tool is derived from the adoption of development of AI, geospatial AI technology. So once machine learning models are being trained, so it's essentially a piece of software, and the key here is training. We have to make this software, in other words, learn how to extract and map automatically with a great degree of precision without human intervention. So essentially, as you can see here, we feed the software with imagery, either be optical photography, it could be LiDAR image, it could be SAR, it could be any image taken by a satellite. And within a matter of minute, automatically it auto-rectifies the image, it extracts the feature, and it identifies the change that's happened since the last image was provided. So if you have an image before of an area and a disaster happened, and within a few hours or even minutes, you can actually show what has happened over there and provide that information to first responders. So essentially, this operation can be redone on a needed basis. Sometimes images could be available many times a day, or even day after day, you could provide new information to the first responder. This means that automatically you are extracting things like road building, rivers, lake, all sorts of features of vegetation. So this also means that the impact of an event, such as a flood, a fire, severe weather, or even new human urban development can be identified, mapped quickly, automatically with a high degree of accuracy and provided to those that are doing an intervention on the ground. Next slide, please. So, so essentially what the software does is extract information before and after the disaster, and it compares between the two. So there's different things it does. It could do an extraction of very specific features, like show me all the buildings, show me the vegetation, show me the roads and how they have changed. Or either it actually looks at the entire image and only points you to areas that has been changing since the last image. So this here is an example of that. And in terms of example on the next slide, please, you can actually see a real-time an example of a fire that took place here in Canada a few years ago, where you actually see before and after. And in green, it's the extraction of all the buildings. So those that are not there after, are those that have been burnt by the wildfire. And those that are green remain. So it actually is a good example of how first responders are able to know what area have been affected, where to deploy their services and their support, but also what are the buildings that are left for them to use? For example, where could I relocate population? You can easily identify that some of those buildings over there are available for them to do that. And on the next slide, you can actually see that we validated this methodology. Next slide, please. So we have actually, we were asking ourselves, so is this methodology, does it work with a great degree of efficiency? So essentially what we did, this is an event of a flood, and we've actually done the work manually. So we've looked at images before the flood that you have at the top of the slide, and at the bottom you have on the right-hand side an automatic extraction within a matter of minutes of the extent of the water during a flood. And on the left hand side at the bottom, we've done it manually. It took it took us a few days to actually do that manually and compare the two to find that the accuracy and precision of the automatic tool is pretty much similar as what a human would do manually. Next slide, please. So, so some of the challenges for this, essentially the bottom is acquiring images before and after the disaster. So it is dependent on your capacity to access good imagery, smoke-free, cloud-free, but if not, radar imagery can be used and see through clouds. But the key element is training this algorithm, training this software. If it's been developed and trained for a specific area in Canada, for example, if it's being used elsewhere in another region, in another country, it has actually to be retrained for that very specific environment. So it needs some preparation in advance. And obviously, sharing the data once you have products can be sometimes challenging, multi-jurisdiction, making sure it goes to the right people. And the next slide actually speaks to that. So we've been both from the development of the software, we've been working with universities on quantum computing, but also making sure that all of the other federal departments in Canada are involved: Public Safety, Environment, Climate Change Canada, the Geomatics Services, in provinces and territories, all the way down to the local level for the first responders. Finally, we are also providing a service of mapping at the international level under the international charter. So for example, over the recent years, we've provided imagery and mapping services in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, Colombia, and Indonesia, on almost all of the continents, and most recently in Turkey, St. Vincent and Grenadine. So we've responded successfully to dozens of international charter activation. So I know I have only a few seconds.
Il vous reste une minute.
Oui, c'est bon, j'ai presque fini. Je vous remercie. So for me to start the conversation, the next logical step would be to marry this information with socioeconomic data. Imagine that our maps could identify very specific areas in near real time affected by a disaster, identify the infrastructure, identify the buildings that have been affected, the households been affected, what are the public buildings still in good shape to relocate people? If we were quickly able to marry this information with socioeconomic data, such as what is the profile, how many people live there, what is their socioeconomic profile, what are their revenues, what are the capacity to meet, what are the cultural background, to inform how to do intervention in the case of an event. To me, this is the next logical step to this process, and we are talking with our folks at Statistics Canada to actually see how we can marry those geospatial information with their socioeconomic databases. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for your presentation. Thank you, all of our panelists, and also thank you for your attending in this forum. So we have, for these presentations, we have 2 questions, and I want to deliver that questions for our panelists. The first question is for Miguel, and we have this question, Miguel, is about what do this percentage of economic losses mean? Does the country's next year's GDP reduce by that percentage? And if you can deliver your answer, Miguel.
Yes. Well, economic, pardon, I'm sorry. Economic loss as a percentage of gross domestic product. It's a Sendai and ODS indicator. The methodology agreed in the Sendai is more detailed on how this indicator is calculated, but basically it's the amount of the direct losses in the relation to the nominal GDP of the reference years. That's basically that's a percentage mean.
Thank you, Miguel. And we have another question for all our panelists. And this is, would you please share how the National Statistics Office could manage one of the challenge to implement the combination of geospatial information, relevant data, statistics that spread over organizations, and official statistics for disaster management effectively, about collaboration and how role system distribution works with another agencies or organizations in your countries. So with this very interesting question, I think I want to give the floor for Jessarela. Maybe you can elaborate something about the relations and networking, institutional networking on Mexico, please, Jessarela.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Georgina. And it's very interesting, the question. In the Mexican case, for example, as I mentioned in the presentation, we have a national system of statistic in geography information. With this with this system, we could share the information and the needs also. And it's very important to link the users and producers of information. Through this mechanism, we could share also our information, this kind of applications. And on the other hand, we are developing continuously applications to put together the available information and data to spread to all the institutions when they needed to use it. But also it's a big challenge to the National Institutes of Statistics. Also, we face some challenges to take advantages of the information, and also to facilitate the use of this information, to collect with quality data, to do official this information from many sources, and the interinstitutional dissemination also is a big challenge in regarding with disasters data. And I don't know, maybe it's the same, it's some of things about it.
Thank you, Jessarela. Jimena, can you elaborate some answer about that question? Which is the Colombian experience on the institutional relationships to integrate this kind of information in the decision making?
Yes, of course, Georgina. It is important to mention that in Colombia, we have the National Policy of Disaster Risk Management established through a law, the Law 1523 of 2012. The lead of this initiative is the Disaster Risk Management Agency. And the role of DANE is, as the lead of the National Statistical System, is to integrate those coordinations to produce better information in disaster-related statistics. In fact, as DANE, as the head of the administrative sector of statistics in these disaster risk management systems, we have projects to produce social and economical information that is basic information to disseminate to support the decision-making process in disaster risk management. So the integration done with the national unit of disaster risk management is very well done. And of course, we have to improve that to produce better information, to have timely information, and of course, supporting decision and geospatial information. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimena. Miguel, do you have any response, any reaction to that question? What about the Dominican Republic and experience with the institutional relationship to improve this, the management of this kind of information?
Yes. Well, in the case of the Dominican Republic, the National Statistic Office, ONE, it has the role of following up on the indicator and statistic defined in the international framework to which the country is a signatory, and promoting good practice for the administrative record of the different state institutions. The Minister of Economy has the role of the monitoring the implementation of the disaster risk management policies.
таких данных и его внедрение
أكثر المتعلقة بالكوارث وذلك دعما
del programa y los proyectos ejecutados.
Précise et appropriée pour toutes les décisions prises dans les
The challenges is to train this role, improve this role, and improve the standard for generate statistics in all these sectoral institutions, and how they can interpolate with the ONE the MEPID for management policies and for follow-up these statistics.
Excellent, thank you, Miguel. And we can see it's about the integrate with other institutions to manage and integrate this kind of information. And the end, Eric, do you have any reaction to this point from your point of view? Excellent, thank you.
From my point of view, the challenge we're facing right now in interjurisdiction collaboration is that technology allows us today to provide first responders with information that's like current as a few hours ago. And we are not used to that, right? So bringing together information from the stats, from the mapping, from the climate science, from infrastructure, it's all in different departments. They all have a role to play, the public service, the public security. And we are not used to bring this information together. And the challenge is that we should be working, putting this information together before an event happens, right? When an event happens, everybody is keen and eager to work together, right? But it's too late in the sense that it takes some time to bring this information. So that the geostatistics database and the first responders information and the public safety and environment Canada and the mapping and the geospatial should be actually brought together and connected in advance and be ready, right? And that is the challenge that we have right now. It's fairly new because before that, the technology did not allow for such a quick response. So now we have to react to that and come together before so we can provide this best information in due time.
Excellent, Eric. And your answer take me the place to integrate all the objective of this session and all the answers of our panelists. The main challenge in our perspective is not to integrate, or not only to integrate these skills in the National Statistical Office. It's more important from this experience, from this point of view, it's more important to build strong institutional relationship to attend these kind of necessities and requirements for the decision making. Eric said very well about the NSO is not able to absorb, integrate all these organizational perspective and roles. Maybe the NSO must to be the integrator, the coordinator of this system to relate the different institutions and the different source of information and validate and maybe be more take care the accuracy of that information. Is not to the NSO the only producer of that information. Is more like a take care the production, the dissemination, and the utilization of that information in the decision making. So with this last comment, I want to end this session. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you to Jimena. Thank you to Jessarela. Thank you to Miguel and Eric. And thank you all of you for your attention and your time. Thank you. The mic is back to the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgina, for the session. Thank you to the excellent speakers as well. And thanks for being such a good virtual co-organizer of the Expert Forum. We really appreciate that. It is time for a short break, but we just have one thing to show to you before we have 8 minutes or so to stretch our legs. And this is actually Michael, who has the floor for a survey. Please, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much. I keep it short. But my excuse is many of us are statisticians, as we could see from the Mentimeter survey. So I ask you for understanding that we have another survey for you. And those who are not statisticians, maybe you will see how important it is to collect statistics, because we want to launch a survey right now. You see the link on the screen, and if I can also the technical team maybe to put this link into the chat. This is a Google Forms survey which will be open until 7 June noon Bangkok time. So you can do now the calculation what this means in your region. It will ask a few questions about the specific situation in your country in relation to need for disaster related indicators. It gives an opportunity also to look a little bit more in detail on the global set of climate change related indicators and statistics. We will hear a little bit more from you, information that we can also use for the closing session. So I would like to encourage you to take this survey either today or tomorrow, but by Wednesday noon Bangkok time at the very latest. The results of this survey will feed into the closing session on Wednesday, and some of the information will also be used for a workshop that we are holding on Thursday, which will be specifically about disaster risk related indicators. And it will be very useful to have your individual feedback from the survey, and makes also the operation of the workshop a little bit more efficient. So please respond to the survey. It's very important for us. It's very important for you. You will see. If you don't do so today, we will remind you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. And indeed, as Michael has mentioned, we really need the responses to this survey for multiple purposes. So please respond. If you have any technical problems, don't hesitate to just approach Michael or myself or any of the other team here for any questions. And also just an add-on, and that is that this survey is available in multiple languages. There is a pull-down menu on the first page of that Google form. So that should not be the excuse for not responding. Yeah. So it's time for a break. We have 6 minutes left. See you in here back 5 minutes past the hour. Yeah. Thank you.
So welcome back, everyone. So we are going to start our third session of the forum very soon. Just for your information, this session is co-organized by the UK Health Security Agency, by ECLAC and ESCAP. And we are going to wait a bit for our participants to be ready. And for our virtual participants, you can join in, and we're going to start very, very soon. Okay, welcome. And I think we shall start now. So this is 9:07 p.m. in Bangkok time. I think we are sitting between our chairs and our bed in the hotel and in the room here. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce the session. So the session 3 is on classifying and harmonizing hazards and disasters. And as my great statistician once said, classification is the business of putting the right thing in the right box. And we're going to hear more why it's so important for disaster-related statistics. So the session aims is to enhance understanding and knowledge exchange on the ongoing work on developing standardized classifications for hazards and disaster, and hope that would also help facilitate the data collection, analysis, and comparison across different regions and countries, and at the same time improve the accuracy and consistency of disaster-related information in support of risk-informed sustainable development. As other sessions, we have 3 key questions, as you can also see on the slide. So the first question is, why is standardization and classification important? Second question is, what challenges are faced in attempting to standardize disaster-related statistics, and what solutions can we implement? With that, we are going to, if I could go to the next slide to see the meta questions. Again, as previous sessions, we would also post the meta question on the screen, and will be a self-paced question. So feel free to answer your questions as we proceed in our session. For our online participants, we will to use either the link or the QR code. For our in-person participants here, maybe easier to scan the QR code from the screen. All right, so and the structure of the session will be as follows. We're going to hear from my colleague Kansa Hamid on a few latest updates from the high-level meeting on the data that took place in New York, I think last month, and a bit on the pilot project on classifying the disaster classification. And we're going to hear from good country experience from Chile on the disaster taxonomy. And we also have towards the end panel discussion that we're going to go into detail on some of the questions that we may have. If you have any questions, feel free to post into the chat box. And as we go, we're going to try to attempt either answering directly in the chat box, or we might pick some of the questions to ask our panelists. So without further ado, Kansa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tirapong, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and almost good night for all of those in Bangkok. We recognise that the after dinner session is normally challenging, but the before bedtime one is a whole other challenge for us, but we're prepared to give it a go. So in the interests of efficiency, we're combining two presentations into one because there are strong linkages between them. So on the next slide, I wanted to kickstart with the main findings. So this is from the report from the Sendai Framework Midterm Review. This is a follow-on from what Mark Gordon was talking about in session 1 in terms of some of the key findings. What I want to do is just hone in on the disaster-related statistics and the data elements of that midterm review. So in the report, I think this particular paragraph really stood out, that it's important for member states to enhance official statistics on disaster risk, including through standardizing risk taxonomies, risk data generation, and risk assessment methodologies. And these are things I think that pretty much everybody, both in this room and the virtual room, can identify with as being quite important. And of course, how do we do that? Through good collaboration between statisticians and disaster risk reduction practitioners, which will help to improve and sustain the quality of the disaster risk related data that's collected. On the next slide, just again, the Sendai Framework Midterm Political Declaration I thought was really interesting, particularly again, this paragraph in there around the importance and the commitment to strengthening the collection analysis of data on hazards and disaster events and their impacts, and including focuses on losses and damages. And we've already heard losses and damages mentioned in the earlier sessions, and it's a theme that's going to be running throughout the week as well. On the next slide, what I wanted to do is just give you a quick insight into one of the sessions that took place during that week of the political declaration. The day before the declaration was made, a risk reduction hub was hosted, and there was a particular session around next generation disaster risk analytics, strengthen the DRR data ecosystem. And there were three sort of key messages that came out of that panel that I wanted to share with everybody. There's a recognition of the challenges of having common definitions and data standards and the importance of having them to measure the progress in resilience, including reducing loss and damage. It was also highlighted that the ongoing work by UNDRR, UNDP and WMO on the loss and damage tracking system is really important when it comes to working with the UNDRR and International Science Council hazard information profiles. And finally, it was recognized that loss and damage data and early warning for all initiatives are key opportunities for us to enhance and strengthen data governance. So here are the key sort of challenges and actually how we can go about achieving them. On the next slide, just a reminder of the key questions that Tirapong has just shared with us. So why is standardization classification important? What challenges are faced and what are the solutions? And the rest of the presentation will go along with that thematic analysis. So starting on the next slide with why standardization and classification is important. On the slide after that, we've got the importance of reporting under Sendai. So in the last 6 years, what we have seen is guidance has been published in order to aid the collection of harmonized hazard and disaster statistics under Sendai. And on the next slide, you will see a series of pictures of guidance documents that you should all be familiar with by now. And if you aren't, then this is an opportunity to get yourselves familiar. But we recognise that actually the indicators that countries can use to measure progress against Sendai targets have been proposed and various amounts of guidance has been published to various effects. And it's important that actually we begin to think about how we harmonise that learning from the guidance and how we can take it forward. Just very quickly on the next slide, just again, a key statement from the 50th session of the UN Statistical Commission around that there's a growing sense of urgency to integrate measurements with statistics and that there's a need for better data. And so what's the proposed solution? Well, on the next slide, we have the UNDRR International Science Council Hazard Information Profile Supplement. For those of you who are not familiar with the hazard information profiles, this is a series of 302 hazard definitions that were produced in consultation and working with over 150 authors and reviewers that included scientists, academics, member state partners, UN agencies, and it really sort of was a labor of love for the team led by Professor Virginia Murray, who you'll hear from a little bit later. And these hazard information profiles are split into 8 thematic areas. And what we are sort of looking at is what is the next steps. So on the next slide, what I've done is just highlight some of the ways the hazard information profiles are being used so far. What's really exciting is that they're being translated into different languages. And again, for those of you who aren't familiar, this document is 827 pages long. So to see it translated into different languages is really exciting for us. What we're also seeing now is that there's an adoption into national systems. So colleagues in Indonesia, for example, have actually adopted the hazard information profile definitions and integrated them into their national systems. And we've also seen that UN Women have been using the hazard information profiles as part of the gender environment surveys. They've taken place in both Tonga and Samoa. The World Meteorological Organization, as part of their cataloguing of hazardous events, are also looking at introducing the taxonomies into their work. And of course, we've got the UNDRR, WMO and UNDP losses and damages database. And of course, the one that's of interest to all of us, particularly myself, but obviously to everybody, is the disaster-related statistics pilot, which is what I'm going to focus on now for the next slide. So what's the background of the disaster-related statistics pilot? Well, following the publication of the hazard information profiles, it was recognized that now we have a common set of hazard definitions. And what we were really interested to understand is, can those definitions be used to develop statistical definitions? Can you use them to count things effectively? And so the decision was made that actually we should be recommending to governments and national statistical offices that they use the reviewed classification for monitoring and reporting in disaster risk reduction, and to try and gradually implement these definitions into reporting systems. So the primary objectives of this project were to provide expert feedback from a statistical perspective on the applicability of hazard classification and definitions. And on the next slide, I've just outlined the primary objectives. Also, the important thing was to identify any possible gaps and shortcomings, and to produce a set of recommendations to respond to challenges identified. And this is where there's a call for action to everybody in this room, both virtually and in the real world room, that actually we want you to get involved and explain a little bit more about what you can do. But before we do that, what have we achieved so far? On the next slide, we have just an overview of what we've done so far. We've undertaken a series of workshops, surveys, database consultation, focus groups with our experts, and focus groups with our country partners in Canada, Mexico, and Georgia, some of whom you've already heard from today. And it's been a really interesting project so far. We've also undertaken a literature review with 109 items identified. We also have currently ongoing an online survey, which we would encourage all of you to participate in. And it's your opportunity to give us your feedback on this project and how the HIPS can work for you. So we do encourage you to click the link and to fill that survey in. But I just wanted to focus a little bit more on the voluntary pilot testing by countries. So on the next slide, we've got the objectives, which was to receive feedback from experts who already operate statistical databases. So we partnered with Canada, Georgia, and Mexico, and they selected hazard information profiles that were relevant and important to them in terms of what they face. And from that, we've actually understood a little bit better around what works and what doesn't work when it comes to the hazard information profiles. Now, I know most of us in here love a good map, and with thanks to the team, we actually have a map on the next slide showing the partners that have engaged with the project so far. As you can see, we've had partners engaged, both the survey and been a country partner and a survey participant. But as you can see, there's a lot of grey areas there. And some of that will be filled through the workshop tomorrow, and some of that through people responding to the survey. We do want to take a global approach, so we do want to encourage you to get involved. So the next question we had was, what challenges are faced in attempting to standardize disaster-related statistics? And so on the next slide across, we've got the cross-cutting results of the survey of the project so far. Don't worry, Tirapong, I'm not going to go through every single thing on there. But what I did want to highlight is that one of the key cross-cutting results coming through is that national statistical offices are saying that they collate data, but not necessarily collect it. And that actually produces some challenges because of the multi-sectorial approach that we have when it comes to disaster-related statistics. And that's what's making collection analysis not standardized across countries. But on the next slide, what solutions can we begin to implement? Well, there are some emerging recommendations that have come out of this project, and there are 6 thematic areas outlined on the next slide. Now, these are not the final recommendations for this project, and we would welcome your insight and opinion into them, but they are sort of interesting recommendations around communication, support for managing partnership approaches, reinforcing community-led hazard impact approaches. These are all things that all of you have been saying. I don't think there's anything on there in terms of emerging themes that will be new to you or that will be a surprise to you. So where do we go next? Well, on the next slide, there's the next steps. Again, a reminder, the recommendation survey, please do click the link and complete it. The team will be doing an analysis of findings. Tomorrow afternoon, for those of you who are here in person, you will be taking part in a workshop where you'll have the opportunity to share your opinions. And following that, we'll have a extended report write-up, and then we'll have a summary report with recommendations published later this year. Finally, on the next slide, I just want to make a point of saying that this project would not have been possible without the people that are listed up there. So a special thanks to Mikhail Nagy, Daniel Clark, Barno Palio, and Rahul Sengupta for their advice and support, because their guidance has been absolutely instrumental. A big shout out to the project team. Unfortunately, weren't able to join us here. So Maddie, Fahad, Megan, Fats, Hannah, and Jack, their work has been really appreciated, and you will see the amount of effort they went to. Our country partners in Canada, Mexico, and Georgia, who I know both here and online, all our survey respondents, and all expert stakeholders. If at next year's forum you would like to also get a thank you, please do get involved. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much for all of you for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kansa. And for all participants, all presentations will be uploaded on the forum's website. So you will be able to access it and digest and bring back to your country for further knowledge. So now we're going to hear from one country case from Chile. So I would like to invite Mr. Claudio Retamel, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, from the NSO of Chile. We'll talk about disaster taxonomy work. So the floor is yours, and you have around 10 minutes. Thank you. So Claudio, do you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sí, sí, sí. Hola, hola. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Claudio Retemal, an environmental analyst of the National Institute of Statistics of Chile. Today, I'm talking about the major events classified related to emergency, disaster, and catastrophe. The next, please. The contents are the following: background, objectives, classified development process, classification structure, codification structure, and future challenges. What is the context? Chile, according to its characteristics, is a country where various types of events occur. and have historical data on disasters collected by the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response, formerly known as the National Emergency Office. Since 2016, the National Institute of Statistics of Chile started working with the National Emergency Office, holding meetings based on risks. During this process, it was identified that there was a lack of a classification system for disaster events, which is essential for developing standardized time series. As a result, there arose a need to develop a system for disaster statistics. The next, please. The objectives, according to this, the first step was to address standardized classification and coding of the available information in the country, leading to the development of a classification document for events based on the reality of Chile. The overall objectives was to create a classifier for major events related to emergency, disaster, and catastrophe. The specific objectives of this work were the following: to define a theoretical framework for a classification methodology, taxonomy, and event coding, to apply the classification and coding methodology according to national statistical production, to obtain a nomenclature of events consistent with the national statistical production, to highlight the importance of a methodology for classification and coding events as a conceptual infrastructure for designing reliable and comparable indicators. The next, please. The process of developing the classifier consisted of the following steps: reviewing national and international classifiers, consulting with experts in the field, organizing working groups and meetings based on risks, engaging with organizations involved in disaster information, proposing a classification and conducting validation work, developing a classification and coding model, encoding classification tree, and finally publishing the technical document. This is a process. On this slide, we can see the classification structure, which is made up of the following levels. Origin can be natural or anthropic. Causal phenomenon refer to the dynamics of natural or human activities where the event is caused. Event class referring to the thematic category of the events. Event type referring to the threat, natural or anthropic, with effect on people, assets, and ecosystem. Based on these levels, the event classification is ultimately obtained, which refer to the combination of all the levels. The next, please. One more. Okay, yeah. Here we can see an example of codification structure of an event, in this case, the earthquake event. The taxonomy of the earthquake event is composed as follows. It is a natural origin. The causal phenomenon is geophysical. It belongs to the event class earthquakes, and event type is earthquake. According to its digits and extension, the following alphanumeric code is obtained. The future challenges are to publish during this year an operational instructive for the registration of major events related to emergencies, disaster, and catastrophe. This will be a useful instrument, a collection of information which will have a record structure for the statistical treatment of the data. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claudio. And I think this is an excellent example of hierarchical classification that works for disaster-related statistics. At least one case from the country, from Chile. And I think we're going to delve down into more details in our panel discussion. And I'm joined virtually by Professor Virginia Murray from the UK Health Security Society agency, and also Claudio, please stay tuned. You also our panelists, and also joined physically by Sole Tubanaka from the Fiji's Bureau of Statistics, and also Naftal Habayaremne, if I pronounce correctly, from ICAT from Africa. And the panel will focus on the challenges and solutions to using classifications and definition for disaster-related statistics. And for our panelists, feel free to also touch upon the three key questions of the sessions if you wish so. I will start from Sole. So each panelist will have around 5 minutes for the intervention.
Thank you. I just want to welcome the participants from their respective countries. I just touch on the standardization and classification. Why is important? First thing is to compare the different countries. They have different disasters. Two, they have a time series or trend. They have different countries have different disaster. We can measure on that, and we can have the indicators reporting by national level, regional level, and international level. When we have the evidence-based policy. For the challenges, first we have to have the centralized data hub. We have right now we have the main major events. Now we try to go to the medium and minor events too, like landslide or any flood snapshot flood. We want to capture that too. We want to collaborate with different agencies, NDMOs, and NSO to work together to try to capture that minor and medium events. When we touch on the solution, we need an MOE or MOE with the NDMO. We need to help us to work together, sharing data together with that signing of that MOE or MOU. The government policies or disaster act to be implemented, and we have the disaster database, or we already have just to get that small information from other agencies to be stored into a government owners or government database. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to Soleil, both online and in the room? If not, I'll invite Professor Virginia first for her intervention. Again, the same question to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join. This is really wonderful, and it's a great privilege to be here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Thank you so much. That's great news. It's lovely to have heard Kanza's introduction. Thank you, Kanza. Yes, I've had the great privilege of being chair of the UNDRR International Science Council Hazard Definition and Classification, the review we published in 2020, and the hazard information profiles in 2021. And it's really out to test everything that we can possibly learn to see whether we've got it right, and reflects obviously the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, paragraph 24J, which talks about strengthening technical and scientific capacity to consolidate existing knowledge and to develop and apply methodologies and models to assess disaster risks, vulnerabilities, and exposures to all hazards. And having listened to Mark Gordon's interjection earlier, it would be just tremendous to note that in the main findings and recommendations of the midterm review, paragraph 21 reported this piece of work that we did. But I really wanted to share something that Kanza touched on, which is a case study with the World Meteorological Organization on cataloging of hazardous events. And this is a piece of work that I've been following carefully, while Kanza's obviously been working much more on the disaster-related statistics. What we know is that WMO is developing a new, implementing a new methodology for cataloging hazardous events, which will incorporate into the operation of the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services observation and monitoring processes. So they will have at the heart some of this work, and they will provide essential inputs for identifying, reducing, and translating risk, as well as for tackling global policy indicators, such as for the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and of course, Sendai. The methodology will use really uniquely identifying and recording hazardous methodological, climate, water, and space weather events and other related environmental phenomena. So Claudio, your discussion about how you were looking at earthquakes is obviously very relevant to the thinking that's been going on at WMO. They will be using the UNDRR International Science Council hazard information profiles, because of course they relate to the work that they have been doing for a long time at WMO, really going back to the 1890s in defining some of the hazardous events that they forecast. The whole purpose is to understand the complex and cascading events and the trends in frequency, severity, and distribution, and hopefully will enable the organization to strengthen early warning systems. Now, early warning systems have come up very strongly with WMO and UNDRR to develop an accounting system, currently with Desinventar, which I'm sure many of you know, but also to build a value chain to understand how we can look at disaster risk management from observations of natural hazards towards a system that will enable numerical assessment of associated cascading impacts. Now, early warnings for all were announced on the 23rd of March 2022, and only last week WMO reported that early warnings for all officially became WMO's top priority for work, which is really important. And my final comment is that in the report from the midterm review, which Mark referred to very briefly, we were most encouraged that the work that we've been doing with our 800 partners from scientific institutions, organizations, scientific advisors to build these hazard information reports was described as groundbreaking. Really great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with you. And it's wonderful to be part of this group and for the incredible work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Professor Virginia. So any immediate questions to her, either from online or in the room? So if not yet, I'm sure you are thinking about your questions, but feel free to add into your chat box or write down in a piece of paper. We might have some opportunity for responding to some of the key questions. So now I hope Claudio, you are still with us online, and you already meant I think your presentation touched upon many important aspects already. Maybe if you could give some pieces of advice for countries who are joining the forum today, if they're going to follow the same pathway that you have done in terms of developing classification for disaster, what would be your advice in starting off or in making sure that we work towards coherence in the future?
Yes, the first reviewing the technical report hazard definition and classification review from the technical report of an NDRR. Okay. See, and two, the maybe national disaster risks reduction policy. Okay. Of the own country. Yes. There are no official event classified now in the world. Okay. No. For this reason, we decided to develop this work in Chile. Yes. And after the event classifier will be applied when the operational instructive in Chile is developed. Entonces, I can share the link to the website after. I can also send my email. You will write me, and the document is only in Spanish version. But I can say you, okay? But the first is reviewing the frame from NDRR. Yes, the framework of NDRR, the National Disaster Risk Reduction. Yes, this is.
So thank you very much. And even if your manual is in Spanish, I think we can leverage our technology for translation. At least we can learn. I think, and thanks for very practical advice. I think is very useful. So I'll bring everyone to another part of the world, Africa. We'll still the same type of question, Naftal, from African perspective.
Thank you so much. I first have to make a disclaimer. I was not meant to be part of this panel. It seems like My friend here, Kanza, got interested in what I shared in the afternoon when we had some group discussions on the part of our region, that is IGAD. IGAD stands for Intergovernmental Authority for Development. It has 8 countries or member states. That is Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Djibouti, Somalia, and Eritrea. So IGAD has some centers. One of them is called ICPAC, that is IGAD Climate Prediction Application Center. And we have several services which we extend to all other countries of East African region, that is Rwanda, Burundi, as well as Tanzania. So the entire region has around 11 countries who are getting these services. So mainly, if you look at our website, we have what we call East Africa Hazard Watch, and you have had so much geophysical data, and where we watch different disasters, that is either drought, food security, flood, cyclones, where we give some even weather forecast. And you realize now we are moving from just geophysical to also looking at predisposition of people, because those who were And now we want to move to incorporating socioeconomics aspect of it, so that we come up with some vulnerability assessment, come up with different indicators related to socioeconomics. And now the challenges we are facing is...
Notamment, nous faisons maintenant face à d'autres défis pour l'obtention de ces données. Le partage des données entre États membres est également un défi.
Produced, and how we can also, once we get to that level, we are able also to automate and have a layer of this physical data as well as the socioeconomics data layer, so that we automate and be able to generate some hotspots when there is a specific disaster. So we are also enhancing member states, because we have a regional situation room which all those activities are operated, but now member states are willing to, and they want to have each member state its own situation room where they can be monitoring the disasters as they come. But now I welcome anyone, any partner who is willing now to work in the region to come on board, so that we help each other to achieve that goal. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So that exhausts my panelist, and so I open up the floor for any questions that you may have. I do have one question, but wait for colleagues to speak up first. Maybe I can start to ask now, and ask you. I'm sure there are a lot of questions floating around, but I think someone needs to speak first. So we hear that countries have been making efforts in standardize and classifying.
Beaucoup de pays ont essayé de faire des efforts pour classifier les...
Has not been just started now; it has been ongoing, and we also have the global work on this standardization. Maybe question perhaps to Kansa first. How do you see everything finally coming into one standardized system that works for our country? Because towards the end of the day, we want to make sure that data are comparable across country, while countries are perhaps cannot wait and start moving ahead. For example, the case of Chile.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and thank you very much for that. And it is a question that was raised during the midterm review session as well. The goal of standardization is not for everything to be exactly the same. So the key success measure here is, can we actually achieve a basic level of standardization, but also allow the ability to be able to adapt to natural or sort of local contexts, as national or subnational, and whatever the geographical and national situation is. And I think that is what we really want to work towards, because we recognize that actually for a lot of countries, they don't experience, for example, floods in the same way. They don't experience earthquakes in the same way. So having everybody doing the same thing is not the answer. But we do need to have some level of agreement of the basics that everybody can achieve. So it could be things like, if we think about mortality, having basic death recording as a starting point, which the WHO are very keen to ensure that, and are working with countries to support that development. And sort of other options around is better understanding what the key challenges are in countries. And that's why it's really important to get everybody's feedback to understand what are those hazards that are particularly important for you, and where is the opportunity for similarities, and where can we actually adapt for national contexts.
Excellent. Wondering if any of panelists would like to contribute to or further elaborate, maybe from Kansa's answer. But from statistical point of view, you can always, if we follow the hierarchical classification, if the most detailed labels are not comparable because country have different way of classifying, or events are more naturally defined, then we might move up one step, or even move up further step, so that at least at some level we're comparable across the world. That might be doable as well. Right, I think we are a little bit ahead of time. But we're not done yet. We have a few many questions. Oh, also, okay, Professor Virginia.
If I might come in and say how important this is. To us, we know that understanding compounding, cascading, complex hazards and risks is a really, really difficult area to work in. And your help in trying to get us to understand this will be very important, and links very closely to the cataloguing of hazardous events and how to actually determine what these mean in terms of losses and damage are really important. So this, I hope, will be something you'll be able to address in the next few days. And I look forward to learning so much more from the outcome of your discussions. Many thanks.
Thanks. I think, yeah, rest assured, that will be one of the key sessions of the forum. So I see Rahul's hand. Do you have a microphone, Rahul?
Thanks so much. I just wanted to revert to what Kansa was mentioning, and then also it relates to now what Virginia just mentioned. The early warning systems and the work on there is quite pathbreaking in one way, in that they are always looking at multi-hazard early warning systems. So we are very clear that countries cannot just say we are working on this particular hazard or that particular hazard. Those days are gone. What, for example, in terms of the monitoring and work that's ongoing, but that's not the only way to do it, but has been to look at the hazards and then weigh those hazards. So you weigh your hazards in an order of priority that you have. So somebody may have the cyclones and the hurricanes at top priority, whereas some other floods may be lower, and the earthquakes maybe have a different priority. But it's not that you can wish them away. They will still be there. So if a return period is 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years, it doesn't mean they go away. So borrowing from that analogy, I think in other areas also over and above early warning system, this should be followed. And just to mention what Virginia was alluding to, We are working closely with WMO, UNDP and UNDRR are working with the WMO, which was mentioned about the new system of disaster losses and damages tracking. And please see that I am purposely using the plural forms, the losses and damages, which is slightly different from how we see it in the climate world of loss and damage. But there, what WMO is bringing in is exactly what Virginia just mentioned. So the cataloging of the hazardous events, so bringing in the science and the Met Department's knowledge and experience, and so integrating it into the tracking, into the loss and damage tracking system itself, so that we can actually attribute the loss and damage to specific hazards that are standalone or interrelated or cascading, as Virginia mentioned. So again, I'm not trying to market an event, but on Thursday we will be discussing this in the morning. So please feel free to join us Thursday morning.
That's excellent, Rahul. Thanks. And I'm now excited to see the results of the mathematics question. So Kansa, should we move to mathematics question? So can we see the results, please?
Thank you very much. I was just checking with the team. So have we had any responses? And I got the response back. There are loads, which is super exciting. And I think the number one thing that's coming out here is comparability. And if you look below it, comparison, because everybody wants to know what's happening and what does it mean in terms of working or, neighboring countries or similar countries. And I think that's really important. But other key sort of words or messages that are coming through are the importance of harmonization, and to understand and to have a quick response and organization, and to set benchmarks and understanding, so that there are a lot of sort of really interesting, important keywords coming out of there, and it's good to see that health, for example, is in there, and interoperability as well. So thank you very much, because I think we will take this forward and use it for our planning. And the next question was around, just waiting for these Menti to update. More of you are filling in, it's updating. We've had 27 answers to the challenges that are faced in attempting to standardize disaster-related statistics. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of the key things that are coming out is that actually there are a variety of disasters. And of course, we've just heard around the issue around variety of type, effect, specification, affected area, and the cascading and compounding hazards, but also intersectoral coordination, which is a theme that has been coming up throughout the day already. And what's also interesting is the differing interests and financial constraints, which actually, how do you balance the public interest with actually what's needed in terms of being able to understand, disasters going forward, and having the financial resources and capacity. And earlier in the workshop sessions, colleagues from countries were saying, look, we've got the will to do this, we want to do this, but actually we just don't have the capacity in our country to be able to deliver this. And it's important that that's reflected there. And finally, to end on a positive note, we were looking at the possible solutions and just seeing them coming through. And we have got 24 answers, which is always an optimistic thing, which means that actually the solutions exist. People know what needs to be done. It's about how do we get there. So developing new guidelines are important. We saw earlier in the presentation there are at least 4, if not more, different guideline documents. Having one integrated document might be the solution, might not be the solution. Tools with new technology is added to programming and training as well. So actually it's great to have fancy tools, but it's really important that the training goes with it. And collaborative multi-sectoral networks and platforms are really important, not just within country, but I think across internationally as well. And we're seeing sort of, requests for standardized methodologies and frameworks, distinct and where possible proxy statistics and indicators. And that's particularly important where countries may not have very established surveillance systems and therefore will need a proxy. And, we need to agree what that proxy would look like and if everybody's able to do that. There's a lot more on there, but we will share this with everybody afterwards. I'm conscious that in here, everybody is ready to go to bed, and I'm sure you at home also have other places to be. But just want to hand over to Tirapong and say thank you very much to everybody who participated in the Menti.
Thank you. And I think that brings us to the end of first day of the forum. And just a few announcements that for people tuning online, the very same Zoom link will work for the whole 3 days. So please just come in at the same time tomorrow and day after. And for our colleagues in the room, we'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. in this room. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day and good night.